to correct that. I mentioned earlier that evolution works over multiple generations. And what we're seeing right now is a kind of blatant exploitation of the wealth of the American system by a gang of parasites. Creationists are parasites. They are taking advantage of the wealth that science and industry have built in our country, that our natural resources have provided for us, and they're squandering it in stupidity. And what that means is that, yes, America's doing great right now. Well, sort of great. There are signs on the horizon. We're doing relatively well, but give it a couple generations, and where this will work out in the end is when the United States becomes, the Albania of the world. That will take a while, and you better hope we get rid of the nuclear weapons before we get. But you know what I mean. It will work itself out because they will drag the entire country down, and what makes me angry is they're going to drag my children and grandchildren down with them. That's why I fight them.
Move here.
Yeah.
Okay. I really enjoyed your presentation, particularly because it gives some comfort to think that the previous assumption that competition was the basis of evolution is now, the science is now showing that cooperation is
yes,
equal.
competition is part of it.
Yes,
yes.
Cooperation. However, I was still left feeling somewhat uncomfortable, and I want to try to articulate why the discomfort, and it's something along the lines that, isn't there a risk if you try to explain modern human behaviour in terms of evolution? People can pick and choose which aspect of evolution they choose to use in order to explain natural human behaviour.
Right.
And I've always thought that this idea that we should even unconsciously try to go back to or aspire to what is quote-unquote natural is really risky.
Yes.
And I speak as a woman here. I don't particularly like staying in caves and cooking other people's food. But isn't the thing about being human is that we can choose to be not natural. We can actually choose to go against our evolutionary biology and choose to behaviour which actually may not be natural but is perhaps more human.
Right. Yes, so yes, you're quite right to be a little uncomfortable because I'm treading close to the line of committing a naturalistic fallacy and saying, well, this is natural, so this is the way we should do it. What I want to get across, though, is that what history tells us, what evolutionary history tells us, is that there have been a range of potential solutions. And many of them have worked out well. But what we see when we look at that history is that some strategies seem to work very well for solving big problems. And cooperation seems to be one of those strategies. So what I'm saying is not, we must follow this strategy because evolution dictates it to us. I'm saying that evolution has told us there's lessons we can learn, and that we should pick and choose and would say, well, if we want to solve this problem, here's how we should do it. Now, I think you could also make an argument that, well, there are species that are weedy little parasites that are rapid exploiters of new environments. And yes, we could follow those, and that's the perfect model for rapacious capitalism. Okay? And you could say that, but you can also say that those are not long-term stable solutions. Those are quick exploitation solutions. And so, again, we should, like you say, look at the world and say, how do we want our world to be? How do we want it to look? How do we want it to live? And I would say that, yeah, we should say, no, I don't want to live in a cave, and I do not want to have to pop up babies every year and watch 9/10 of them die from childhood diseases. I want the benefits of modern society, but I want those benefits to last not just for me, but for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. What can I do to keep these going? And what I would say is that, yeah, living for the short run is not the answer. Living for the long run is, and what that will require is cooperative behavior on humans' part by choice. Not because biology impels us, but because we have a choice and we can choose to live this way.
I also have a question about the cooperation. You were telling us about monkeys who chose the reward they could share with their neighbor. But you didn't say anything about the relationship between these two monkeys. I believe I have learned sometime that you're more willing to share rewards when you have a close relationship, genetic relationship. You are willing to lay down to die for 8 of your cousins.
Right.
And that, well, you are going to that, and that means what kind of which individuals would you put in the block, or would you cooperate with, and who would you fight?
Yes. This has been a common explanation for altruistic behavior in organisms. Ultimately, it's actually selfish. That what you're doing is you're benefiting your genes, because if you selectively help your kin versus strangers, then you're actually working to benefit yourself in an evolutionary sense. And that's an argument that's been made, and it's a reasonable argument. It explains many phenomena. However, the thing is, how do you define kin? And most of us, I'm looking around this room. Would I look at you and say, "Oh, well, you don't look like you were any among my ancestors. You don't look very related to me, so you can die, and I'll help the others." So if a guy came in and asked me to pick which of you would die, I wouldn't go say, "Well, okay, the brown-skinned people are the least related to me, so I'm sorry you're going out of the room." No, that wouldn't happen. That what we find is that when you actually look at how altruistic behaviors operate in a practical sense, we do not have such precise calibration of our relationships. And then we operate generally on the basis of, you're human. I will preserve all of you humans' lives over, unfortunately, chimpanzees. And that's the degree of altruism we generally care about. Now, of course, you can be in a culture that tends to emphasize other similarities more, and then what you find is you do find, I'm from America, right? And right now, we're busily sending these drones over Afghanistan, and we're blowing up people. And we're not feeling too bad about it, even though we should. And it's because we live in a culture where we tell ourselves all the time, and we listen to our media, and it tells us all the time, that if you're American, you're better than everyone else, and that as a true patriot, you should be doing what you can to help Americans, USA, number one, that's us. And so part of this is culture. It's what you're taught, what you're indoctrinated with. And I think this is, again, another thing where we have to work better. As I mentioned, we want to expand, as humanists, we want to expand the community, the social community, to not just our nationalities, but to the entire world. And that takes effort. And seriously, if somebody is dying in Afghanistan, that diminishes me. I think that's a genuine altruism that all of us share, I hope. 2 more questions, she says. Okay.
I'm Lars Petter Hengstad. I'm a Norwegian humanist, and I'm sorry to inform you that in Norwegian, the well-known saying of survival of the fittest by Darwin are translated incorrectly, consequently incorrectly, and I will now translate it back into English, and it then goes survival of the strongest. That is how it is presented in Norwegian.
Right, although I got to clarify one thing here. Darwin did not say that. Darwin actually was made very uncomfortable by that phrase. That was a Herbert Spencer phrase.
Yes.
Herbert Spencer was also big into eugenics and British nationalism, and it reflected his attitudes more than Darwin. As I mentioned, a quote from Darwin earlier, Darwin recognized a plurality of mechanisms for selection to work, and it wasn't all just being stronger than somebody else. So yeah, that's a perfect example, though, of how we diminish the breadth of evolution with our language. Yes?
I have a question about modern medicine. In evolution, have been natural selection between through many years. And modern medicine now can help people to they not die, can help them. Very good. How do you think that will influence the natural selection for in future for thousands of years? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. You know, personally, I like the fact that I'm not dead. So this is a good thing. And I sort of understand this is also a very common objection that people say, well, you know, this modern medicine stuff, it's defeating natural selection and it's allowing all these weaklings to survive, which is sort of true. But the way to look at it is that evolution does not have a predisposition, it does not have a direction, it does not have a purpose. And what's actually happening in human populations now is that we are evolving faster than ever before because we are accumulating greater and greater diversity over time. What that means for future generations and future regimes of selection, if such a thing has happened, you know, if the economy collapses and global warming takes over, what that means is we will be under selection, intense selection again. What that means is that right now in the human population, we have a greater reservoir of diversity than ever before. This is one thing that could save us, is modern medicine has allowed all these different genes to expand in our populations in interesting ways. And who knows what those combinations will produce? They could be quite beneficial to us eventually. We don't know. Give it time. Hopefully we are not going to be selected against, but if it does, we're ready.
Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Thank you very much, Dr.